Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together is a perennial classic, an inaugural favorite in a very, very long line of successors. Originally, I was probably just gonna leave this one alone. I bring it up a few times in analyses that aren't reviews, and I wanted to save most of my thoughts for those. Also, Mr. Erner's review of it already covered all the basics. No matter how you feel about him, the review holds up. I probably watched it when it came out, eons ago. But when I went to rewatch it, I was like, yeah, I agree. Even at the tail end, we understand the history a little bit differently now, but the general sentiment is still there.
Phineas and Ferb was a great cartoon in a very, very dark era. I won't say that it saved the medium or anything, but it definitely pulled more than its weight in a time after Ed and Eddie ended and before Adventure Time started.
So I didn't really feel a need to go into it, but then I dove into my notes and I discovered something so good. I was like, nah, I can't keep this from the people. They need to know the injustice this episode has suffered. So that's why I'm here. Part of why this would probably be considered a special is due to the nature of the structure. It's abnormal for the boys to be doing what they're doing at this moment, but as far as season 1 episodes go, this is pretty normal. Back then, this show had more of like a sitcom vibe. It did a lot more traditional episode types and tropes and structures. This one definitely fits in, but generally speaking, it felt naturalistic to this world. I would also say that the structure inherently reinforces this synergy with the rest of the season. Normally, when Phineas and Ferb are inspired to do something, maybe they just watch it on TV, or they see something that's already pre-existing and decide to scale it up, join in on the fun. Here they're being plunged into a whole ass story that they had no part in, that they have not shaped in any capacity whatsoever, and are tasked with understanding it. What does it mean? What happens within it? How do we fix it? Now, this isn't super uncommon on its face either, but at this point in the show, which is pretty early, it probably came as a bit of a shock. In a generalized context, the family structure of the Flynn Fletchers is different. It's supposed to be acknowledged as such, but it's also irrelevant to most of the proceedings within this highly idyllic world that is predicated on creating spontaneity within formulaic premises. They're normal people and everything, but we don't really see them quibble or argue or anything. Especially not at this point. Like, how many times has Lawrence shown up? Did we even know Lawrence existed at that point? So to throw the spotlight on them and put them in a situation where they are tasked with keeping it together is really interesting.
Not yet, Ferb.
Characteristically, they don't really break or bend or anything. There's no real dramatic climax. But playing around with the idea is a pretty interesting way to shake things up. So there's a lot of heart and there's a lot of stakes thrown into this story, which is essentially a Dora the Explorer tier fetch quest. There's like half a dozen songs that make their debut in this episode. All of them are quite lovable, but there's only really one that I acknowledge as like the height of musical and thematic synergy. This song represents everything that the show is about. Now, realistically speaking, none of these guys were anything that the boys couldn't handle, but in the context of the story, this guy's like the final boss. He's the last one they get to, but he also is the toughest nut to crack. He has perhaps the most understandable motivation. This is essentially a dialogue between two people, and it's a dialogue that is built upon the last few conversations that they had. When Phineas and Ferb went to Danny, all they had to do was sit and kind of go along with everything. With Bobby, Phineas just had to butter him up a bit. So their task is not only to convince this guy to reunite with his ex-band members, it was also to keep up with him as he slowly gets back into the swing of things and flexes his level 9001 rhythmic skills. The way that everything slowly builds over the course of the song, it's preparing you for that great apex. It's only after the point where Swampy starts to reminisce and feels the power of rock coursing through his veins that we really start to feel it, And again, it really is the boys that push him into this moment. See, both sides are getting really fired up over time, because if Phineas wasn't pushing back the way that he was, he wouldn't be able to recognize that true potential. Swampy would not be able to tap in to the very greatness that was there the whole time if this one person didn't just speak up and force him to. He figured it out all by himself. And by the time he does, he starts to enjoy it. So when Phineas jumps in, it is a soulful balance. Structurally, most people would probably just see his asides as accoutrements. They're not necessary to get the gist of the song. But this is really just an extension of what's already being done. He has the rhythm, he had it the entire time, and we are not gonna stop until he recognizes it. Everybody believed in him. He just needed to believe in himself. And once he did, the doors swung right open for him. I want to remind you that at this point in the show, they would have been about 20 episodes into the airing order. But this is clearly the strongest endorsement of its main messages and themes. It is very emblematic of what the show wanted to do and eventually ended up achieving later down the line. Something like Summer Belongs to You is great. It's inspirational, aspirational even. And this was before all those episodes where they started banging on about the power and the creativity of kids. No, this was just raw belief, determination, grit, enthusiasm for the unexpected. This is what the show wanted to be. So it's not a surprise that this one got nominated for an Emmy, right? It's on the 2008 docket for Outstanding Original Music and Lyrics. Every year there is at least one show representing animation or kids properties, and it looks lopsided given the competition, but everyone had to do it. They didn't have any issues. Family Guy and Simpsons had no problems fetching wins before this. One could even argue that the competition was on the weaker side that year. Excluding our collective bias, I think the song would have had a fair shot here. It's strange to nominate a first-year series for something like this, but it's damn well deserved. Obviously, it did not take home the gold. Instead, the award for that year went to a track that was more, let's just say, culturally relevant.
I'm Matt Damon.
Now listen, I don't give a fuck about gag tracks. There's a lot of really well-made ones. Like, they're stupid, funny bullshit, but it's stupid, funny bullshit with a purpose and production value and, like, stakes behind it. If they are making award-winning content, they should be recognized as having done that. Not everything has to be playing with chess, not checkers. This is not a 7D level tournament here. But given the spread here, you cannot sit there and tell me that this was the best choice on a technical or aesthetic level. Look back at the spread and look at this song. Back at the spread, this song. It's preposterous. Dig in a Box won the year before, and that one was doing way more musically and visually. This one sits collecting dust, and nobody remembers what the fuck it even was. Meanwhile, Dick in the Box lives on as one of the greatest pieces in SNL history. I wouldn't give a shit about this song losing, but like they had competent choices here other than the cartoon. Sad 50 Cent is a national treasure. I refuse to let this go. The disrespect is palpable, and I will not stand for it. 15 years later, I'm still not over it. But it is a snub that the show recovered well from. Probably not one of their more publicized nominations, but it was an important one nonetheless. One of the most important tracks within one of the most well-respected episodes, getting capped, but being remembered for years and years past the other ones, truly means something. This episode has rhythm, this episode has style, this episode has the power of music coursing through its veins. Within 104 days, Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together is worthy of an encore.